Today we are reading the Mariah Delany Lending Library Disaster by Sheila Greenwald, Chapter 10. It was a very rough time Mariah had that night. In fact, once again she found out she was too upset to eat her dinner. She really loved her parents and she felt that she had betrayed them. What made it worse was that they didn't say much about it. Henry Delany sat with an expression of real pain in his eyes. He asked Mariah if she had lent many books and if the rest of the Dickens collection was out. Mariah told him it was, and then brought in her card catalog and the shoe box so that her parents could see exactly how many books were involved and where they had gone. Even though they were miserable, they were impressed by her organization and enterprise. She did not inform them that the books were all overdue and that nobody had made a move to return them. In fact, she went out of her way to reassure them that soon all the books would be back on the Delany shelves, safe and sound. Her parents were not reassured. They looked sad and upset, and worst of all, they didn't look angry. This lack of anger bothered Mariah more than anything. She wished they would yell or scream, even punish her, but they were too distressed to bother. Mariah went to bed, but certainly not to sleep. She lay awake thinking for the first time about where being enterprising had gotten her. She even made a solemn vow. She promised that if she got back all the books, she would really knuckle down and devote her time to her schoolwork and not engage in enterprising ventures of any sort until her grades were up and everybody was pleased with her. This vow gave her some comfort and provided her troubled mind with enough peace so that she could go to sleep. The next afternoon, walking home from school, Mariah saw Dave Peterson and his mother just half a block in front of her. She began to run, determined to nab him and make a heavy pinch for her book in front of his book dealer mother. Dave, she called out. She knew he heard her because he began to speed up as if he were trying to get away. But his mother nudged him and turned around. David, dear, someone's calling you. Oh, hi, Dave shrugged. Hi, Mariah. We're going to get me a pair of shoes. I just wondered if my great expectations showed up. Why, David, Mrs. Peterson blinked. Don't you introduce me to your friends? Oh, meet Mariah Delany, Dave said unenthusiastically. We're in kind of a rush, Mariah dear, Mrs. Peterson said. Saturday we're celebrating our anniversary with a big party, and I did so want David to have a new pair of shoes. Today's the only day we can shop. Dave seemed to be drowning in a sea of mortification. But I need to talk to Dave about my book. Your book? Mrs. Peterson looked confused. The copy of Great Expectations you told him wasn't worth much. I told him wasn't worth much. Mrs. Peterson had become a parrot. My dear, I must confess I don't know what you're talking about, but it's been nice meeting a classmate of David's. She was backing away almost as fast as her son. I have got to talk to you about my books, Mariah called to the two figures who were by this time running across the street. For the 3 days after this incident, Mariah tried to collect in earnest. She realized that Pinkwater was doing a terrible job. Nobody took her seriously. If there was to be any collecting, she would have to do it herself. But when she started to collect, she found she was received with embarrassment, excuses, and delay. Sometimes there was even ill will. One thing there wasn't was a single returned book. Most of her schoolmates tried to avoid her. When she pinned them down, they fumbled in their book bags, grabbed at their foreheads, and said, Oh, Lord, I forgot, but I'll definitely remember tomorrow. Somebody jammed Jenny Popkin, snidely referred to Mariah as the collecting agent, and got a laugh out of a small group in the lunchroom. Mariah cornered Bellamy. Who did you see gift wrapping one of my books? I didn't see him myself. Who is it? I really couldn't say. Bellamy looked at a faraway place over Mariah's shoulder. Mariah's heart sank. This was the first time she had been avoided by her schoolmates, even her gang. Pinkwater, Coopersmith, and Bellamy, they looked the other way when they saw her coming. After school on Friday, she decided it was time for a consultation with Lizzie Phipps. She dug her hands deep into her pockets and hunched her chin down into her collar and passed a group of classmates on the corner. Some turned away, some stared back until she crossed the street. How's it going, Mariah? Lizzie Phipps asked. Lousy. My folks know. They're in shock. The kids at school won't return the books. They hate me. I wish I had the time to talk to you right now, Mariah, but as you can see, I've got 20 zillion things to do. She was pushing a cart of unshelved books around the reading room, returning them to their proper places. She lurched to a halt and clasped a hand to her forehead. Why, Mariah, I just thought of something. You could help me out. These budget cuts are murder, and I'm always short-handed. How about you're joining the system for a while and giving me a hand in my library? What do you mean? Mariah was actually sick to death of the very word library. I mean, shelf these books for me. At this point, with your own experience, you know all about the categories and alphabetizing. Tell me when you're finished. Well, Mariah was looking around for a way out, but Lizzie Phipps had more or less pushed the cart at her and run back to her desk. Mariah shelved the books carefully, even taking pleasure in completing the job quickly. The work took her mind off her problems. Just as she replaced the last book, Lizzie Phipps ran up to her with one of the Curious George books in her hand. Would you please read this story to that group of children, Mariah, before they wreck the place? Mariah settled herself on a low stool in the picture book section with Curious George on her knee. A circle of small children formed around her. They listened to every word, and when she finished, they pleaded for more. She read them Madeline next. She held up the book so they could see the pictures. They crowded around her and leaned against her and put their hands on her shoulders. They were completely still when she read, still and listening. After the reading, she told them that her voice was tired and it was time to read her own book to herself. She selected a copy of Great Expectations and opened it to the chapter where she had left off. Before long, Mariah was as lost in her book as the children had been in theirs. When she looked up at the clock, she couldn't believe how the time had flown. She had surely found peace and pleasure in this quiet place. After the hurly-burly of her life at home and at school, it was nothing short of miraculous. Library's closing, Mrs. Phipps called. Mariah put on her jacket. Mrs. Phipps came over to her. Thanks for being such a help, Mariah. You really saved my life today. I hope you'll come whenever you can and give me a hand. You're very good at it. Maybe tomorrow we can have a talk. Walking home, Mariah realized that no talk would help. There were tough times ahead. She began to wonder about how she had gotten herself into such a lot of trouble. She had done it all by herself. She couldn't blame anybody, that was for sure. No one had pushed her into making a lending library. It was completely her own idea. It had seemed such a great idea, too. She could never in a million years have predicted that all these troubles would grow out of it. The fact that they had shook Mariah to her toes. Her confidence was shot. She had gone too far, and she hadn't known it till it was too late. The people she had taken for granted most, her parents, were miserable, and the people she thought she could trust, her classmates, were not dependable. She had miscalculated. It was very unlike Mariah to think about things she had done. Usually she just went ahead and did something new, but this lending library was different. Or maybe she was changing. She couldn't think of doing something new. She was in too much trouble, and she would have to keep facing up to it until it was over. Somehow, the library had helped her. It was a good place to get in touch with your thoughts and get some distance from outside problems and pressures. But those problems still existed, and they had to be dealt with. Irwin was the only Delany at home. He was working on his second bunch of bananas with his face only inches out of a large book in Latin. Hi, Mariah said. Pinkwater called. Said to call her right back. He couldn't look up for a minute. On the telephone, Pinkwater sounded teary. Listen, Mariah, nobody pays any attention when I tell them to bring back their books. They laugh at me, and they're beginning to detest you. Some people say if she wants them, let her come and get them. Okay, then. That's what I'll have to do. Good, Pinkwater said and sighed with relief. And I want you to come with me. Oh, Mariah, I can't do that. You can and you will, and we start at Dave Peterson's tomorrow morning. Oh, but Dave gift wrapped his. Oh, he's the one, Mariah said triumphantly. Thank you very much. Oh, dear, Emma wailed. Mariah slammed down the telephone. Finks and traitors surrounded her. Her path was set. Even though her course would be rough, she had gotten into this thing, and somehow she would get out of it, no matter what. And that is the end of chapter 10.